All right, Marine. Locking in on MCDP 1 to 3, Chapter 2 today. Achieving a decision.
Ooh, this is a good one.
That's a cornerstone of maneuver warfare, right?
Yeah.
And we're going to break it down so you can really put these concepts into action.
You know, what's really striking about this chapter is how it just throws out those old school incremental tactics.
Yeah, it's not about slowly grinding down the enemy anymore.
Oh, right. It's about decisive action.
Forcing the enemy to react to you.
Exactly.
MCDP 1 to 3 uses some really vivid historical examples to hammer this home, right?
Yeah.
Like contrasting battles.
It does. It contrasts two very different battles. The Allied landing at Anzio in World War II, which we know got bogged down.
Right.
And then Hannibal's just stunning victory at Cannae.
Way back in 216 BC.
Yeah.
One was a missed opportunity.
Total missed opportunity.
The other, a masterclass in maneuver warfare.
Textbook.
So let's unpack Anzio first.
Okay.
It seems like the Allies had a chance to really turn the tide in Italy.
Yeah.
But it didn't quite work out that way.
It did not.
What happened?
They achieved total surprise
Okay.
with their amphibious landing. I mean, imagine.
Yeah.
The Germans were caught completely flat-footed.
Wow.
But the Allied commander, General Lucas, hesitated.
Oh.
He got nervous about his supply lines.
Makes sense.
Worried about getting overextended.
So he played it safe instead of seizing the moment.
He did, yeah. And that hesitation, it was fatal. It gave the Germans time to regroup, and what could have been a lightning strike to capture Rome
Right.
turned into a long, bloody slog.
Yeah.
You know, MCDP 1-3 really uses this as a cautionary tale about the dangers of indecision.
Yeah. Fortune favors the bold.
There you go.
Now let's jump to Cannae.
Okay, let's do it.
This was back, what, over 2,000 years ago?
Yeah, 216 BC.
Tell us about Hannibal.
Okay, so Hannibal
What made this victory so legendary?
was a genius.
Okay.
He was facing a Roman army that was way bigger than his.
Right.
But he knew he couldn't win a straight-up fight, so he used the Romans' own aggressiveness against them.
I mean, he basically lured them into a trap.
Exactly.
Trap.
Yeah, feigned a retreat,
Ah.
sucked the Romans into the center of his lines.
Right, into his trap.
And then, bam,
Yeah.
cavalry slammed into the Roman flanks,
Oh, wow.
encircled the entire Roman army.
Jeez.
It was a complete rout, like a textbook example of how to achieve a decisive victory through maneuver and surprise.
It's like a scene out of a movie, totally outmaneuvering your enemy, crushing them despite being outnumbered.
You got it.
I mean, that's pretty inspiring stuff for a Marine, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the lessons from Cannae, they're just as relevant today as they were over 2,000 years ago.
I mean, that's incredible.
MCDP 1-3 emphasizes that as a Marine, you always aim for a decision.
Okay.
That decisive blow that cripples the enemy's ability to fight.
So, Anzio and Cannae, one a cautionary tale,
Uh-huh.
the other shining example.
Yep.
But let's get practical.
Oh.
How does a Marine actually develop the skills to make those decisions, to achieve those victories?
Yeah.
MCDP 1-3 talks a lot about military judgment, right?
It does.
What does that even mean?
Well, military judgment. It's
Yeah.
like the cornerstone of everything in this doctrine.
Okay.
It's about seeing the battlefield clearly, making sense of the chaos, taking decisive action. It's a combination of knowledge, experience, and intuition.
So it's not just knowing the tactics.
Right.
It's about being able to apply them in a constantly changing, high-pressure environment.
You got it.
Okay, so MCDP 1-3 breaks down military judgment into three key parts.
Yeah.
Understanding the situation,
Uh-huh.
recognizing patterns,
Yes.
and making decisions.
Those are the big three.
Okay, so let's start with understanding the situation.
Okay.
I imagine that's pretty crucial before you can even start thinking about making decisions, right?
Absolutely. And for a Marine,
Yeah.
a big part of understanding the situation comes down to MTTT.
Oh, here we go. Acronyms.
Mission, enemy, terrain, and weather. Troops and support available, time available.
So MTTT. Okay, I'm sensing a pattern here in MCDP 1-3.
Yeah, there's a few of them.
Lots of acronyms.
Ah,
But it's more than just memorizing a list, right?
right.
What does it actually mean to apply MTTT in a real-world situation?
So imagine you're leading a squad,
Okay.
Marine. You need to constantly be asking yourself these MTTT questions.
Okay,
What's my mission? Where is the enemy? How strong are they? What are they likely to do?
got it.
What kind of terrain am I operating in? And how can I use it to my advantage?
Okay,
Do I have the firepower and support I need?
right.
And perhaps most importantly, how much time do I have?
Time. The one thing you can never get more of.
That's it.
So you're constantly scanning the environment.
Yes.
gathering intel, putting the pieces together to build a clear picture of what's going on.
Exactly, and this is where experience comes in. The more time you spend in the field, the more you develop that sixth sense for reading a situation. It's about knowing what questions to ask, what to look for,
Okay.
how to interpret the information that you're getting.
So then there's pattern recognition.
Yeah.
Which sounds almost like intuition. How does that factor into military judgment?
Think of it like this. Every battle, every engagement, every firefight you experience, it adds to your mental database.
Okay.
And you start to see how certain enemy tactics work, how terrain can influence a fight, how different units perform under pressure.
So it's almost like you're building a mental library of combat scenarios.
Exactly. And the more you build that library, the faster you become at recognizing patterns in new situations.
Okay.
You might see an enemy formation and instinctively know their next move. Or you might sense a change in the tempo of a battle and realize an opportunity is about to open up.
Oh, interesting.
MCDP 1-3 even uses the example of General Buford at Gettysburg.
Okay, yeah.
He was outnumbered by the Confederates, but he instantly recognized the importance of the high ground and took decisive action to hold it, bought precious time for Union reinforcements to arrive.
Wow, talk about thinking on your feet.
Right.
Okay, so we've talked about understanding the situation, recognizing patterns, but what about the actual decision-making?
Okay.
Especially in combat.
Yeah.
Decisions need to be made fast. What guidance does MCDP 1-3 offer on that?
You're right. In the heat of battle, there's no time for lengthy analysis. Sometimes you have to trust your gut.
Right.
MCDP 1-3 calls this coup d'oeil. It's that instinct that seasoned commanders develop. An ability to grasp the essence of a situation almost instantly.
It's like having a sixth sense for combat.
That's a good way to put it. But coup d'oeil isn't just about blindly following your gut.
Okay.
It's about drawing on your experience, your knowledge of tactics, your understanding of the enemy, and making a rapid, informed decision.
So it's about balancing intuition with sound judgment. You need to be able to think quickly, but also make sure your decisions are aligned with your mission and the overall situation.
Absolutely.
So this is where that METT analysis we talked about earlier comes in.
It does. Yeah, METT helps you frame your decision-making. It forces you to consider the key factors that will influence the outcome.
Okay, so we got to understand the situation, recognize patterns, make decisions. That's a lot to process.
It is.
But let's get down to brass tacks.
Okay.
How do you translate all this into action on the battlefield? How do you actually achieve a decision?
Now we're talking. MCDP 1-3 lays out some key practical steps for focusing your combat power and achieving those decisive results. It starts with identifying the critical vulnerabilities in the enemy's defenses.
Critical vulnerabilities. Break that down for us.
All right.
What makes a vulnerability critical? And how do you even spot them in the chaos of battle?
Okay, so it's not about finding any weakness.
Okay.
A critical vulnerability is something that, if exploited, will truly cripple the enemy's ability to operate effectively. It's about finding those pressure points that'll bring the whole system crashing down.
So not just a chink in the armor, but the weak spot that brings the whole suit down.
That's it.
Okay.
Give us some examples of what that might look like on the ground.
Yeah.
Let's say you're facing an enemy position that's dug in on a hilltop. A critical vulnerability might be their supply line. If you can cut off their supplies, they'll eventually be forced to withdraw or surrender. Or maybe they have a key communication hub that, if taken out, would disrupt their entire command and control network.
So it's about understanding how the enemy operates, what makes them tick, and then finding ways to disrupt those systems.
You got it. And it's not just about physical vulnerabilities. Sometimes the most critical vulnerabilities are psychological.
Psychological? How so?
Think about it. An enemy that's overconfident or complacent is vulnerable to surprise attacks. An enemy that's demoralized or lacking in leadership is more likely to break under pressure. MCDP 1-3 stresses that understanding the enemy's mindset is just as important as understanding their physical capabilities.
So you're not just fighting a physical battle, you're waging a psychological one as well. You're trying to get inside their heads and exploit their weaknesses.
You're in their OD loop.
I like it. Warfare is as much a mental game as it is a physical one.
Couldn't agree more.
Okay, so we found the enemy's critical vulnerability. What's the next step in achieving decisive action?
Okay, so once you've identified the vulnerability, you need to start shaping the battlefield to your advantage. MCDP 1-3 calls this shaping the operating area, and it's all about setting the stage for that decisive blow.
Shaping the operating area. It sounds almost like you're setting a trap.
You are. You want to maneuver the enemy into a position where they're most vulnerable, where you can exploit their weaknesses and maximize your strengths. This might involve using artillery fire to pin them down, flanking maneuvers to cut off their escape routes, or even using deception to mislead them about your true intentions.
Oh, deception. Now that sounds like classic Marine Corps tactics. I remember reading about the feints and misdirection used in the lead-up to the ground offensive in Desert Storm.
Exactly. Those Marine raids kept the Iraqis guessing about where the main attack would come from. Threw their defenses off balance. Shaping the operating area is all about creating favorable conditions for yourself while disrupting the enemy's plans and throwing them off their game.
So it's about being proactive,
Yeah.
not just reacting to what the enemy throws at you.
Right.
You're dictating the terms of the engagement, forcing them to react to your moves.
You're taking the initiative. And in maneuver warfare,
No.
initiative is everything.
So we've identified the critical vulnerability. We're shaping the battlefield to our advantage.
Okay.
But with all these moving pieces, how do you make sure everyone's on the same page?
Yeah.
Working towards the same goal?
Right.
I mean, the MCDP talks about the concept of the main effort.
It does.
Right.
Yeah. What's that all about?
The main effort is the focal point of your attack.
Okay.
It's the unit that's tasked with achieving the most critical objective.
Every other unit, every other Marine needs to understand how their actions support that main effort.
So it's like the spearhead of your attack, the unit that's punching through the enemy's defenses.
Exactly. And every other unit, whether they're providing fire support, flanking maneuvers, logistical support, they're there to help that main effort succeed.
So it's about prioritizing resources, coordinating actions, making sure everyone is aligned with the overall objective.
Exactly. And remember, the main effort isn't static.
Okay.
It can shift during the course of a battle depending on the situation.
Oh, interesting.
So imagine one unit encounters heavy resistance while another unit makes a breakthrough. The commander might choose to shift the main effort to exploit that breakthrough and keep the momentum going.
So you're constantly adapting, reassessing, making sure everyone's efforts are focused where they'll have the biggest impact.
You got it.
It sounds like a lot of mental juggling for a commander.
It is. It requires a high level of situational awareness.
Yeah.
And the ability to make those tough calls on the fly.
All right, we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about understanding the situation, identifying critical vulnerabilities, shaping the operating area, focusing combat power through the main effort. But there's one final piece MCDP 1-3 emphasizes, and it might be the most crucial of all:
Okay.
boldness and ruthlessness.
Now you're talking. These qualities, they're absolutely essential for forcing a decisive outcome in battle.
I can see how boldness, that willingness to take calculated risks, is vital in war. But ruthlessness, that sounds pretty intense, even in a military context. How does MCDP 130 define that term?
It's not about being cruel or inhumane. Ruthlessness in this context is about relentless pursuit of the objective. It's about exploiting every advantage, pressing your attack until the enemy is completely broken and incapable of fighting back.
So it's about having that killer instinct, that refusal to let up once you have the enemy on the ropes.
Exactly. It's about maintaining the pressure, seizing every opportunity, denying the enemy any chance to regroup or recover.
But as MCDP 1-3 points out, boldness and ruthlessness have to be balanced with sound judgment and ethical leadership. There's a line between aggressive action and unnecessary brutality.
Absolutely. Boldness without judgment can lead to recklessness, and ruthlessness without control can descend into cruelty.
Right.
As a Marine, you're a professional, bound by a code of conduct. You fight hard, but you fight fair.
Okay, Marie. That's a wrap for part 1 of our deep dive into MCDP 1-3, Chapter 2. We covered a lot, from the historical examples of Anzio and Cannae to the core principles of military judgment, understanding the situation, recognizing patterns, making sound decisions under pressure. And we explored how those principles translate into action on the battlefield, identifying those critical vulnerabilities, shaping the operating area, focusing combat power through the main effort, and embracing those qualities of boldness and ruthlessness.
Okay, so we've laid the groundwork, but now let's get down to how you apply this knowledge. How do these principles we've discussed actually translate to your experience in the Corps?
It strikes me that we've been talking about some pretty big picture concepts, historical battles, core doctrine. But what does it look like for an individual Marine to embody this philosophy of decisive action?
That's a great point. MCDP 1-3 isn't just some theoretical manual. It's a toolbox
Right.
for every Marine, a guide to thinking critically and acting effectively in any situation you might encounter, from a firefight to a major operation.
So let's open that toolbox. We've talked about MTTT, that acronym-packed framework for understanding the situation. How does a Marine on the ground actually utilize MTT? Paint us a picture.
Okay, picture this Marine. You're out on patrol, you're leading your squad. Every step you take, every observation you make should be filtered through the lens of MTT. It's your mental checklist for making sense of the chaos around you.
So I'm constantly asking myself those MTT questions. What's my mission? Where's the enemy? And what are they up to? What kind of terrain am I dealing with? And how can I use it to my advantage?
Right.
What support do I have available? How much time do I have to make decisions?
Exactly. And it's not a one and done process.
Right.
The situation's always evolving, so your understanding needs to evolve with it.
Okay.
You're constantly gathering information, reassessing the situation, adjusting your plan accordingly.
MCDP 1-3 also stresses knowing your own capabilities,
Hmm.
right? That's the troops and support available part of NTTT.
It is knowing your own strengths and weaknesses, the equipment you have, the firepower you can bring to bear. That's as critical as understanding the enemy.
And then, of course, there's time, that ever-present pressure in combat. How does a Marine factor that into their decision-making?
Time is always ticking on the battlefield. You might have time for careful deliberation, or you might have to make split-second decisions. That's where experience, training, and that kudo we talked about earlier really come into play.
Yeah, the more experience I have under my belt, the better I'll be at making those quick, intuitive decisions that can mean the difference between success and failure.
You got it. It's like anything else. The more you train, the more you practice, the sharper your instincts become.
Okay, let's say I've sized up the situation using METTT. I've got a handle on what's going on. Now, how do I put those principles of decisive action into practice? How do I find those critical vulnerabilities in the enemy's defenses and exploit them?
This is where you really need to think outside the box.
Okay.
Don't just go for the obvious targets. Look for those gaps, those weaknesses that the enemy might not even realize they have. It could be a lapse in their security, a weak point in their logistics, or even something as simple as exploiting their overconfidence.
So it's about outmaneuvering them, outthinking them,
Yeah,
finding those unexpected angles of attack.
exactly. And remember, vulnerabilities aren't always physical. They can be psychological, too.
Oh, psychological. Give us an example of that.
Think about it this way. An enemy that's overconfident or complacent is more susceptible to surprise attacks or ambushes.
Uh-huh.
An enemy that's demoralized or lacking in leadership is more likely to crumble under pressure.
So you're playing a mental game as much as a physical one.
Absolutely. Warfare is as much about breaking the enemy's will to fight as it is about inflicting casualties.
All right, so I found the vulnerability. What's next? How do I shape the operating area to make the most of this opportunity?
Think of it like setting a trap.
Okay.
You want to lure the enemy into a position where they're most vulnerable, where you can bring your strengths to bear and exploit their weaknesses. This might involve using supporting fire to fix them in place, while you maneuver a flanking force into position, or maybe you use deceptive movements to draw them into an ambush.
MCDP 1-3 emphasizes that combined arms approach, right?
It does.
Using everything at your disposal, infantry, artillery, air support, to create a synergistic effect.
Exactly. Each element has its strengths.
Right.
And when you combine them effectively, you create an overwhelming force. It's like an orchestra. Each instrument plays its part to create a powerful symphony of destruction.
And all of this is orchestrated with the main effort in mind, right? Every action, every maneuver is designed to support that decisive blow.
Absolutely. The main effort is the focal point, the unit tasked with punching through the enemy's defenses. Everyone else needs to understand their role in supporting that effort.
MCDP 1-3 also highlights the importance of communication, making sure everyone's on the same page, that everyone understands the plan.
Yeah, communication is vital on the battlefield.
Right.
Clear, concise communication can prevent misunderstandings and potentially disastrous mistakes. It's about ensuring everyone is moving in the same direction, working towards that shared objective.
And finally, there's those qualities of boldness and ruthlessness that we discussed earlier. How does a Marine balance those qualities with the need to maintain discipline and avoid unnecessary brutality?
That's a great question. It's a fine line, but a critical one. Boldness is about taking calculated risks, not being reckless. Ruthlessness is about pursuing the objective relentlessly, but not at the cost of your values or your humanity.
So it's about fighting hard, but fighting fair. It's about maintaining your discipline and your professionalism even in the most chaotic and stressful situations.
Exactly. As a Marine, you're not just a warrior, you're a professional, bound by a code of conduct and a set of values.
This has been an incredible deep dive into MCDP 1 to 3 so far. But as you go through your training, Marine, I encourage you to go beyond just understanding the theory. Challenge yourself to apply these principles to real-world scenarios. Imagine yourself in those situations and ask, how would I achieve a decision? How would I use MTT to assess the situation, identify those critical vulnerabilities, shape the battlefield to my advantage, and lead my Marines to victory?
We've been really breaking down this idea of decisive action, but we got to remember winning a battle is only part of the equation.
Right, it's about achieving a larger strategic goal.
Exactly. Think
Right.
of each engagement, each firefight, as a piece of a much bigger puzzle.
Okay.
Every action you take on the battlefield should contribute to the overall mission.
So how do you connect those dots? How do you make sure your actions on the ground are aligned with that big picture strategy?
It all starts with understanding your commander's intent. Why are we fighting here? What are we trying to achieve? What's the end game?
That makes perfect sense. If you don't understand the why behind the mission, how can you make decisions that support the overall strategy?
You hit the nail on the head. Once you understand the commander's intent, you can start to see how your actions fit into the larger scheme of things. Every decision you make, every maneuver you execute, it should all be geared towards advancing that ultimate objective.
It's like each unit is a piece on a chessboard, and you need to understand how your piece contributes to the overall strategy.
That's a great analogy. And just like in chess, every move has consequences. You got to anticipate those consequences, both immediate and long-term. Think several steps ahead and make sure your actions aren't inadvertently undermining the larger plan.
MCDP 1.3 also talks about the importance of initiative, right? It's not just about blindly following orders. It's about taking charge when the situation demands it.
Initiative is crucial in maneuver warfare. The battlefield is a fluid, chaotic environment. Things rarely go exactly according to plan.
Of course.
You need to be able to adapt, improvise, seize opportunities as they arise.
But how do you balance initiative with discipline? How do you make sure everyone isn't just running off and doing their own thing?
That's where trust and shared understanding come in.
Okay.
Leaders need to empower their Marines to make decisions on the ground, but within the framework of the mission and the commander's intent.
So it's about decentralized command,
Right.
but centralized purpose.
You got it. Everyone needs to be pulling in the same direction, but they also need the freedom to adapt and react to that ever-changing situation.
Right, and it all comes back to that core concept of military judgment,
It does.
having the wisdom and the experience to make those tough calls under pressure.
Absolutely. Military judgment is the glue that holds it all together. It's about understanding the situation, anticipating the enemy's actions, making decisions that advance the mission while minimizing risk.
All right, Marine, we've taken you on a deep dive into MCDP 1 to 3, Chapter 2, and explored the principles of decisive action. We talked about the importance of military judgment, those practical steps for achieving victory on the battlefield, and how to connect your actions to the larger strategic picture. But here's one final thought to carry with you. How do these concepts apply beyond the physical battlefield? How do they translate to the challenges you might face in a rapidly changing world? In new domains like cyber warfare or information operations, the principles of maneuver warfare, of decisive action, are adaptable and relevant no matter the battlefield. Keep studying, keep learning, and semper fi.